The ability of decent people to continually describe awful things is probably limited at some point, don't you think? Have you ever had a player whose character went rogue at your table? Well, not just rogue, but purposely evil. Evil of their own free will. Or maybe they wanted to play an evil character right from the start of the game. Now, this has only happened at my table a handful of times, maybe twice. And I'm not sure about you, but back in the day, it seemed the license to cause mayhem wasn't necessarily any of the evil alignments. It was actually chaotic neutral that caused most of the issues. I'm not sure why, but for a time, maybe even still, there'd be horror stories from tables with a chaotic neutral character or group of characters that were just acting like complete idiots. It was sort of like I can do anything I want with no personal consequences. But look, I'm not really evil. But I digress. It has led to a larger question, one that came up recently on Twitter. What is acceptable at the table and what is not acceptable as far as, well, overtly evil acts? Realistically, it's probably a battle between player agency and the DM's will to continue to describe, potentially horrible things. First of all, we as DMs are all conditioned to describe our worlds based on a combination of real-life experiences, what we read in books, and what we see on TV and in the movies. I think it's safe to say that, for the most part, when we sit down to play a fantasy RPG like D&D or any of the much better choices available these days, many of us are working from a common set of morals or at least tropes. Your character doesn't need to be Dudley Do-Right. He or she can be the man with no name. The group can be the Dirty Dozen. But in the end, when the forces of darkness are gathering, most of us assume that they're going to firmly step on the side opposite that of the darkness. But I'm sure there are groups where the PCs either don't care or perhaps might even want to assist that darkness. And for me, a lot would depend on, how close they're coming to being absolutely evil, in terms of my willingness to run that sort of game. All right, so let's circle back a second. I've been running a weekly game on average for over 30 years straight. 25 of that has been with more or less the same group. It's not only a gaming group, but it's a group of friends and family. As a DM, I can tell when some members of the group are maybe going through stuff in their real life because it does present itself in how they play or even how they build their characters. It's not often talked about, but in a close-knit group, what's going on at home has an impact at the game table. As a DM, it's incumbent on you to present the world the players are playing in. And I do believe that once you sit down with the players, you owe it to them to describe the things that occur in that world, even if you may think they are distasteful and bloody to you personally. Now, you don't have to go into nauseating detail, but if actions in the game lead you there, you should at least acknowledge it. And once in a while, those sorts of things can have a memorable impact. But the problem is anyone drawn to playing just sort of a despicably evil PC might try to keep topping what they did before, just leaving a litany of acts more depraved than the last. I mean, not only is it distasteful, but it starts to lose its impact. That's why I would worry about a player or even a group that wants to go full evil or chaotic neutral all the time. It might be an indication that there's something going on in their real lives. In the end, it's going to leave your game fairly boring after a while, too. In other words, most evil campaigns, they just seem unsustainable to me. The ability of decent people to continually describe awful things is probably limited at some point, don't you think? And I bet it begins to sap their creative energy. Wizards of the Coast dabbled in this area back in 3rd edition when they printed the Book of Vile Darkness by Monty Cook. And while it had a few interesting things in it, there's a reason it's not much remembered these days. It's certainly not a classic, and it has stuff in it that might be good for a dalliance, but would just seem to be silly to implement fully. Now keep in mind when I'm talking about PCs going evil here, I'm really talking about the truly evil things, mostly sort of harm of varying degrees to women, children, if you get my drift. But there are areas that come up that do fall into that gray zone, and one of them is torture, which is something that I think many groups probably do come across at some point. I always think of that scene in Dirty Harry where he's trying to rescue a 12-year-old girl who's been kidnapped and is dying, and he has the suspect, Scorpio, trapped on the 50-yard line of Kezar Stadium. He begins to torture Scorpio to find out where she is. Needless to say, almost everyone who watched that movie probably sided with Harry. After all, we knew the person he was torturing was a complete monster who deserved it, especially in the face of a dying young girl. Have your PCs ever done something like that? Have they ever tortured an orc or perhaps a fellow human because they ran out of options to find out key information where lives were at stake? In this case, I think there's a clear difference than what we were talking about earlier. The PCs are going over the line, perhaps, but it's not gratuitous, and it's in the service of the story. And the DM is free to throw in consequences for their actions, too. In that Dirty Harry movie, the police do find where Scorpio has imprisoned the young girl. Harry's torture worked. But tragically, she has already died. And not only that, because Harry did torture the suspect to find the information, he can't be prosecuted and is now free to offend again, which he does. Again, this is how you handle these things in a mature, logical, and maybe even tragically poetic way. Another thing that comes up in fantasy games is slavery. Almost always it's, of course, the bad guys that own slaves, and I think it's well within bounds to portray a world where that sort of thing happens. It doesn't sugarcoat a society where, labor is desperately needed and nefarious people are going to try to take the easiest path to achieving their goals. It gives the PCs a chance to intervene and perhaps even find a way to attack a villain using that system of slavery against him. The only ones who have a problem with incorporating this issue are the ones that think slavery began and ended in the United States, when of course it does go all the way back to biblical times, and continued in eras that a lot of fantasy worlds take their core from. Hiding from the issue sort of sanitizes things and also takes a tool out of your big bad guy's bag. Wizards of the Coast recently and sneakily changed the language in the online versions of their rulebooks. In one change in the Monster Manual, the Ifriti go from owning slaves to now owning servants. This is ludicrous on many levels. When you kill an Ifriti, are you killing the kindly master of those servants? Will they get mad if you kill him? And if he treats them like 9-to-5 employees, is he all that bad?
Maybe he's got a dental plan.
Dental plan.
Lisa needs braces.
Dental plan.
Lisa needs braces.
Dental plan.
Lisa needs braces.
These are the types of idiotic things that can happen when you actually try to whitewash the world and get rid of evil altogether. It just becomes boring in the other direction. In the end, choosing an evil act in the cause of what's seen as a greater good, to me, is far more interesting than a PC or a bunch of PCs who just want to murder unarmed people because, they can. I would not have much interest in running a full game like that, and fortunately the folks I play with don't really want to play that way either. If you have a group that wants to get really evil, I suppose in the end it's up to you to decide whether that's something you have the fortitude to run. But I would certainly think it through. You might be in for a bit of a rocky road. On the other hand, don't get preachy when your PCs cross a line they think they need to get the job done. There is a difference, and they don't need you moralizing to them about it. Just handle the situation as you would any other, and think if there's any consequences that may or may not arise from their actions. That's what you owe them. Well, that's all for today. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, remember to throw a like on it. And if you like the cut of my jib, go ahead and subscribe with those notifications on. Also, remember to join us for our weekly live stream, The Lair, where me and my friends wisecrack about gaming and sometimes non-gaming related things. We hope to see you there every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and until we talk again, goodbye.
What qualifies you to be a U.S. Senator? You have 60 seconds.
Hi, good night, everybody.